Okay, so good morning. It's Friday, September 4th. It's 9:01 a.m. This is a meeting of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We have the last 2 days been looking at financials and related to the COVID pandemic, as well as the next budget year. Now we're returning back to H926, the Act 250 bill, which has been referred back to our committee through the action of Senate Finance on the floor yesterday. One of the other things that came up this week in conversation with leadership is that there is a very hard stop 3 weeks from, I think, today, and it may well occur before that. So if we are to move an Act 250 bill, it needs to be out of this committee and really through the Senate by no later than the end of next week. And we've had, I think, a robust discussion since we returned on August 25th and found that there are a lot of issues. You know, we've been cycling through them, and I think we are not finished, resolving them. And as a matter of fact, my shorthand for it is that, this is one of those onions where you peel away a layer and develop an answer to a piece. And then once you think about that carefully enough, it brings up some more questions. Good morning, Senator Rogers, and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me in. I was thinking there was a conspiracy.
No, you just always have to use the link of the day. So I wanted to put a proposal before the committee with the idea that there is a lot of work that's been going into 926. There are areas that we have to sort through, and we all know this, and we haven't been able to resolve. So the proposal I want to put on the table for discussion is the bill, the version that I'd asked Jude to post that to our website, and for committee members who might prefer to get stuff as email, I also emailed it to you all directly, I don't know, just 5 minutes ago before committee got going. So the shape of that is that I think we have, there's been widespread agreement that we would like to do something on trails, especially in the era of COVID. Outdoor recreation is something that's kind of somewhat of an economic bright spot, and we're interested in supporting trails. Actually, this committee has been trying to make progress on how we implement best management practices on trails for years. And then secondly, in response to the Senate's 2014 request, Commissioner Snyder did an in-depth study on forest health, forest fragmentation, and there's a strong recommendation that Act 250 should be revised to take into account forest fragmentation and habitat connectors. That it's a major whole. It may not have been that way 50 years ago, but we are now in a different era where we're losing forest land in total acreage, and we're seeing the land that is still forested being broken into smaller and smaller pieces. So with that, because of the level of support around those, the proposal I'm putting on the table for committee discussion is to limit our Act 250 bill at this moment to those two features, and to hold off on the balance of the bill, where we haven't been able to reach agreement on quite a few issues. So I'd say, so let me pause there and just ask if the folks on the committee, what's your response? We're going to make a decision as a committee on how to proceed, and given our constraints, that's my proposal to us, to narrow to what we, I think, have seen agreement on. Recognize that there are other good things to do. This is not that we're opposed to the other things, but I don't think we're in the right place and time to be able to adequately.
And Senate
Take the
Natural
test.
too, apparently Bray is rolling out his new proposal.
We can hear you, Secretary Moore.
I apologize.
No worries. All right. Okay, so with that, Senator McDonald.
We have tried to talk to other senators about where we might go, and when trying to outline or frame this, the question was, are we talking about 2,000-foot roads in this proposal? And the answer is no. It's the connecting corridors, not the 2,000-foot roads. So that's just a clarification of what the chair's proposal is. So.
Thank you for that. So maybe if there are no additional comments now, I think probably the best thing to do is just to make sure that we're literally looking at the same thing. And we have I asked Ellen to, prepare. So we have the bill back, right? We're going to put out a committee report. So it's teed up as a committee report, a strike all amendment to the underlying bill, kind of a reset. And because time has gone by, the other thing that Ms. Schakowsky has done for us is to go through dates. And we've had some conversations in committee in the last 2 weeks about dates. So Ms. Schakowsky, if you could come on screen and take over and do a split screen walkthrough, that would be helpful.
All right, so good morning, Ellen Schakowsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. The draft that Senator Bray was just referring to is on the committee page. It's under my name. I have it pulled up here. So it is almost entirely made up of language you have seen and that hasn't changed. There are a couple of things highlighted in yellow that are slightly different based on the conversation we had the last time I was here. So I will talk about those. But to start, the first few pages of the bill are related to trails. So section 1 amends the Act 250 definition section and adds new definitions for recreational trail and the Vermont Trail System Trail. Those definitions are the same and haven't changed in a while.
And committee members, so if you have questions about any of these provisions, don't be shy, jump in case we haven't talked about it for just a little bit. I just want to make sure that it all makes sense to everyone as we read through. So, okay, thanks again. Sorry for the interruption.
Right, so I can read them and we can discuss them if you would prefer, but none of this is new to the committee. So section 2 then amends the definition of trails in chapter 20 of Title 10, which is the Vermont Trail System Trail chapter. So we amended that definition. And then section 3 is the language that establishes the new Act 250 jurisdictional trigger for Vermont Trail System trails. So the first piece of yellow here is a date that we have discussed, and I think that you might, it's something you have an option with. So the date refers to trails that have been constructed on or before October 1. Previously, it was July 1. So this is this says construction of improvements for Vermont Trail System trails on a tract or tract of land involving 10 or more acres. That's development. This subdivision shall be the exclusive mechanism for determining jurisdiction over a recreational trail that is a Vermont Trail System trail and shall only apply to the construction of improvements made on or after October 1, 2020. So I changed that date because it previously was July 1, 2020. So, but I kind of picked October 1 because it is upcoming, but you can, you have the option to pick a different date there.
Thank you.
And then again, further down in the section, for purposes of this section, involved land does not include land where no ground will be disturbed or cleared, or any Vermont Trail System trail constructed before October 1, 2020. So this is about, again, the same date. So picking a date at which point already existing trails don't qualify for this new jurisdictional trigger. The next section amends Act 250 and it adds a new piece of language. It hasn't changed, and this just says the trail, for purposes of Act 250 jurisdiction, jurisdiction attaches only to the trail and the incidental infrastructure of the trail, not the rest of the parcel.
And so I'm just trying to double back and was this this is current practice under Natural Resources Board Rule 74? Is this the Rule 74 connection? And now we're making explicit in statute.
Yeah, 71. Yeah,
71.
Rule 71 of Act 250.
Thank you.
Section 5 adds two subsections to the exemption section of Act 250. So also, and this language hasn't changed other than a date change. So no permit or permit amendment is needed for a to provide access across a recreational trail. And then also notwithstanding 213 and 214 of Title I, and until January 1, 2022, no permit is required for a Vermont Trail System trail recognized pursuant to Chapter 20 of this title if the trail was in existence prior to October 1, 2020. So again, I picked October 1 because it seems like that's an upcoming date, so I didn't want to have any retroactive dates in there, but you'll have a decision about that date also. And then finally in the trail section is the report on or I guess not finally, but there's the recreational trails report. So at the last committee hearing on this, the Agency of Natural Resources recommended changing the due date to January 15th of 2021. So this is the report that ANR will bring back to the legislature with recommendations for a best management practice driven program for the administration of Vermont Trail System trails. And then finally, the new jurisdictional trigger has a sunset date of January 1, 2022. So that's the rec trail language. So no substantive changes have been made other than changing the dates.
So let me just also double check. We're talking here about Vermont Trail System trails. For those that are not part of the Vermont Trail System, do they, there's no, how does current law, how does this bill affect them, if at all? And so let me pause there.
So most of the language is specific to Vermont Trail System trails. However, the Rule 71 language, so the Rule 71 language limiting jurisdiction to the trail and infrastructure, that's broad to all trails.
Okay.
And then the exemption for, so no permit amendment is required for when you construct a path of access across a recreational trail. So that is also not specific to Vermont Trail System trails.
Okay, thank you. And then when we reach that, the end date, the prospective repeal that's included January 1, 2022, we revert to current law. Correct, right? So All right, and I think everyone knows the basic idea is that we're creating some regulatory certainty for trails while the parties that have been working continue to work, and we hope deliver helpful recommendations to the next legislative session. Okay,
Senator Bray?
yes, Senator Rogers.
So it's been a bit, so I believe I'm correct in that the sunset is in there because we anticipate a new plan to be in place by that time. That's our hope.
Right, I mean, I think there's a bit of carrot and stick here, right? So we're creating some regulatory uncertainty, help people continue to operate. Meanwhile, I think people are looking for a better regulatory program, just as you're saying. And one of the encouragements to help figure that out together, to get to yes, is going to be, but what we're offering here is only a temporary, it buys us time to get it, but this is not forever, so.
It's a window. Great, thank you. That's what I remembered. Thanks.
Okay, on to forest blocks. Well, let me pause. Any other questions back on trails? All right, thank you.
Okay, so the rest of the bill is about forest blocks and connecting habitat. So it is all, again, largely language you've seen before with one exception. So Section 8 amends the definition section of Act 250. And so we add definitions for connecting habitat, forest block, and habitat. Based on your last meeting, A&R recommended adding a small phrase in habitat and forest block, connecting habitat and forest block to sort of clarify. So that phrase has been added. And also I deleted the definition of fragmentation. Fragmentation is not used anywhere in the amendment, so except for in the rulemaking section. So adding a new definition to Act 250 didn't make sense. And then Section 9 is the new language for Criterion 8. So I did make I am proposing 2 small changes to the language of Criterion 8. And so Jude, I sent you a PowerPoint. Did you get it to post? I wanted to propose a small tweak, so I have put this language in a slide just so you could see it a little better. So in the prior draft, Criterion 8.
Posting it now for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So in the prior draft, this is the language that we had for Criterion 8. So will not result in an undue adverse impact on forest blocks and connecting habitat. If a project as proposed would result in an undue adverse impact, a permit may only be granted if effects are avoided, minimized, and mitigated in accordance with rules adopted by the board. I'm proposing to make it slightly more succinct and easier to read. So I just sort of cleaned it up a little bit, and so that it will now read, will not have an undue adverse impact on forest blocks and connecting habitat. A permit will only be granted if impacts are avoided, minimized, and mitigated in accordance with board rules, with rules adopted by the board. The reason I did this is that I went back and I read the Act 250 existing criteria again, and I wanted this one to more closely match the structure and language of the existing criteria, the other 10 criteria. So this is a proposal.
You have prepared this for our consideration.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I know that's been an ongoing concern to try to make sure that we're not using a term in a way that's not consistent with other pieces in Act 250 or other rules over at the NRB so that we create some uncertainty between translating between what we're saying into language that they use. So thank you for that.
Right. For example, the word effects is not used in any of the other 10 criteria. So I thought we should try to more closely match that by using the word impacts. So yes, this is something to consider. So that is the only change in language in the rest of the draft. Section 10 is the rulemaking section for criterion 8C, having the NRB adopt rules related to how forest blocks and connecting habitat are avoided, minimized, and mitigated. There is new language included in here on page 7. This was language you discussed at your last meeting that was recommended by VNRC. So we added the phrase standards establishing how impacts can be avoided, minimized, or mitigated, including how fragmentation of forest blocks or connecting habitat is avoided or minimized. The rulemaking is also going to include identifying forest blocks and habitat and which of those and when are eligible for mitigation, what the appropriate ratios are. And then there are some dates in here you will need to make decisions about. So currently, the board shall convene the working group for the rulemaking on October 1, 2021. And then the final rule is due on August 15th, 2022. Section 11 is the resource mapping section that's been here and hasn't changed in probably 6 months. This is having, it's already largely existing law. It's mostly clarifying ANR's resource mapping and adding forest blocks to the resource mapping. And then finally is the effective dates. So this act shall take effect on October 1, 2020, except criterion 8 shall take effect on September 1, 2022. So the other slide that I included in my PowerPoint is just a lineup of all of the dates in this bill so that you can think about them in comparison to each other so that they all line up. But if you have questions on the other sections, I did sort of speed up at the end.
It'd be good to, if you have thanks for putting together the date slide, and maybe we can look at that, but before going to that.
Sure.
Are there committee questions on the forest block piece? I have one, and you had mentioned that in rulemaking, we refer to fragmentation, but we didn't keep a definition in, and I don't know, I mean, I could talk, I just want to check in with you to make sure that there's no need for it. Maybe it's a well understood term in the world of forestry that in a rulemaking, we don't need to be defining it legally within the bill otherwise.
So because it's not being used in the statute, we don't include extraneous definitions in statute. If you would like to include a definition for fragmentation, it would need to be in the session law piece where there is mention of fragmentation. So you have the option to include a definition in the session law section if you would like.
Okay, so we're not the ones who will lead the rulemaking. It'll be the agency, and so perhaps so my proposal to the committee is that we'll put this out, and then on Tuesday, we'll invite anyone interested in speaking to come to the committee and talk to us about the proposal. And I guess I would ask the question to Agency of Natural Resources and the NRB, who would both get involved in using any kind of rule that would come out of all this. Do we have a well enough, well, for feedback generally, but on the fragmentation question, Do they feel like they need something specified so that there's no ambiguity about what do we mean by it? How is it defined? Senator Rogers, I don't know if you have a, oh, maybe you're just turning your screen. Okay.
I actually do have a question at some point. No hurry.
All right, so I'll just flag that question for the agency. Not a biggie, but I just don't want to leave something that turns out to be, people have differing, I don't know if people have differing interpretations, and therefore the rulemaking gets bogged down a little bit on a fundamental definition. Okay, so Senator Rogers, you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, so just reading through connecting habitat means, connecting habitat may include features including rec trails, improvements to farming, logging, forestry. So this is only intended to be if that parcel is under Act 250 review.
Yes.
So this is adding the frag, all this language to include it in the criterion that gets reviewed when you're going through the Act 250 process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be perfectly clear on that. Thank you.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and I was rereading all 10 criteria yesterday, just to refresh my memory. Forestry comes up, but it tends to come, it comes up, for instance, in the form of like productive forest soils and things like that. So it seems to me like what we're missing is kind of a macroscopic view of forests, and looking at them on a larger level, and are you ending up fragmenting them, for instance? Okay, any other committee questions for council on the familiar language? And thank you for highlighting the changes. Any committee discussion about changing those dates? I think some of those we'd already talked our way through, other than the October 1 new date. So thank you for pushing it forward. And with that, if seeing no questions, how about if we go to your Senator Rogers?
Can I ask one more quick one? We at one point had a definition of fragmentation, and now we don't. Could we possibly include it, not that it has to be included in this proposal, but at least have something prepared that has that definition, because I'm personally interested in that definition, and I don't know if other senators will be, and we have removed it, and I think there's going to be some questions about why we removed it. So I'm interested in seeing that language and possibly proposing to put it back in.
Okay, I suppose I understand council's point of, if we're not using a definition, we don't have extraneous definitions. Maybe it could be associated with the rule for the purposes of rulemaking. Fragmentation is defined as, or something like that, so that yes, we're not trying to write a statute with it, but wait, we're about to start a rulemaking. Let's be sure we have an explicit expression of just what we mean by that. So
So would that,
helpful or not? So the NRB can weigh in, as well as Agency of Natural Resources help us out on Tuesday. But so, Ms. Schakowsky, could you prepare something along those lines in case we need it? Like that way of how we might define it in a way that doesn't violate good drafting.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator McDonald.
just I was trying to come up with the phrase or whatever or what our goal is. If we're going to ask for rulemaking, the directions need to be significantly unambiguous, and perhaps that's what Senator Rogers has suggested, and that sounds good. It sounds like worth pursuing.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And particularly from experience sitting in LCAR, it's helpful when the legislature's been more, maybe has been clear. So for a key term like that, it might be helpful to have that spelled out. Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Czakowski, can you take us to your summary timeline document, since we do have quite a few dates?
Okay, so so this is on the website now, and so I tried to line them all up so you can look at them. So for trails, we have the dates of new jurisdictional trigger will only apply to trails constructed after July 1, 2020. But I changed it to October 1, 2020. And so involved land doesn't include any trails constructed before October 2020. So we're sort of setting a point at which existing trails don't qualify for this. We're talking about new construction moving forward. Then we have the new jurisdictional trigger is repealed on January 1, 2022 in anticipation of a new program being set up. So until January 1, 2022, no permit is required for a trail that was in existence prior to October 1, 2020. So those are sort of the two dates that you're working with for trails, as well as then when should ANR's report on the new trail program be due. Previously, it had been December 15th, 2020. ANR asked for a 1-month extension to January 15th, 2021. So that's for the next legislative session. And then we have the dates associated with the Criterion 8 rulemaking. So in the last draft, there were a lot more things happening and a lot of other dates going on. So but as it currently is drafted, the NRB will convene their working group on the rulemaking on October 1, 2021. So approximately a year from now. They will file the proposed rule on August 15th, 2022, giving them 10-ish months to work on the rule with the working group. And then the Criterion 8 goes into effect after that rule is final. So September 1, 2022 is there now, but you do have options for all of these dates. So I just wanted you to be able to line them up and see if you wanted to adjust any of the timelines.
Thank you. And I think, so one of the things we can do on Tuesday is to ask the NRB to take a look at this narrowed bill, takes some requests for reporting off the NRB. There was a report that was in the last proposal we saw from the administration. So maybe that we'll ask, would they like to, could they commence rulemaking on 8C prior to October of 21, if something else is not there. I mean, I think our job is going to be January through, let's hope, May of 21 to say if we're going to come up with a statutory fix to the regulatory scheme for things that, I'm sorry, I'm crossing our wires here. I started to go back to trails again. So anyway, so we'll reconsider those dates with all the parties that have a job. All right, any committee questions on dates? All right. So the proposal is very familiar, but as a proposal, it's new for folks. I want to give people a chance to consider it. And if you have, we'll take testimony on Tuesday on just the proposal. So we're going to set aside, again, there's plenty of important work that's in the larger bill. But the next session is only 4 months off. And I think what we're proposing to hold off on getting into can be taken up safely in January. But it would be helpful to move these two non-controversial pieces forward. So that's the proposal. Any committee discussion? Let me straw poll and see if people are interested in choosing this pathway so that we can finish our work on things that we are amongst ourselves, I believe, in agreement on.
Yeah, I appreciate your work on this. I really do. And I think it's a good place for us to land, given the position that we're in, the testimony we've heard. So thank you.
Okay. I'll just go around the room here. Senator, on my screen, your next block over is Senator Parent. Any thoughts one way or the other about going to this much narrower bill?
I don't. I was taught an important lesson my first year in the legislature. Of course, it was in the House that you had to learn to count to 6, 76, 3, 16, and then 1. And I would have questions of, could we get to those counts on this bill, especially the one at the end. So I don't think this one gets across the finish line, to be honest with you.
All right. Senator McDonald?
I think this is a cleaner, and it allows proper analysis for the more challenging work to be done in the future, which seems to have exceeded our time to get to the answer of all the questions that concerned parties have asked. So my short answer is yes.
Okay. And Senator Rogers?
Much happier with this proposal. I think we've eliminated the highly controversial sections that I believe do need a lot more work. I'm going to have to delve into the frag part a little bit on first glance. I think that proposal looks fairly good with the addition of with a definition. The trails language looks good. I'm quite excited to have the agency work on a new proposal on how we're going to oversee trails in the future, and look forward to that work. So yeah, I'm quite pleased and think that no commitment, but on a straw poll, this looks good to me.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm not asking, thank you. It's perfect. I'm not looking for commitments or a vote, just that we're heading in a direction that people are generally supportive of. So
That I will go along with, generally supportive of.
okay,
Thank you.
so with that, I'm going to, we've actually, I think what we want to do is, again, I want to invite anyone who wants to provide testimony on the proposal what we're looking at to email our committee assistant, Judith Newman, and myself, and we will add you to the invite for Tuesday's meeting, which will be after the floor. I think we have a 15 minutes after the floor. Floor has generally been quite brief, so we'll see if we run out of time on Tuesday. We'll take time on Wednesday. No one will be short of time to comment on the proposal. And this will give people a chance to reread, rethink, and develop a list of questions. If any member of the committee or the public has questions about what we're looking at, if you want to send it to me, I'll be happy to start digging into things, doing some homework to help us have a more productive next meeting, and working with council as well as agency, as well as the NRB. So, I know that a lot of people have put a lot of work into the Act 250 bill in the last, it's almost 3 years since the very first meeting. And this choice right now, to me, reflects trying to find a productive way to finish our work responsibly, not impugning any of the other proposals, things that we're taking off the table. Or it's not a no vote, it's a not yet, we're not ready to act yet realization. So with that, if there are no further comments or questions, I would just thank everyone for your work that led us get to this point, and say, please let us know, and we'll see you Tuesday after the floor.
Thank you.
With that, we are adjourned. Senator McDonald.